to pull out of occupied land. Well, let's get more on our top story, and that is the US-led coalition airstrikes on ISIL. And as we just mentioned, just in the last few hours, well, just in the last hour, the UK has agreed to join the strikes. And to discuss this, I'm joined from London by Amandla Thomas Johnson, a spokesman for CAGE. That's a group set up to empower people impacted by the so-called war on terror. Amandla, thank you so much for being with us today. Now, as we've just mentioned, the UK Parliament has given the green light for UK participation of airstrikes against ISIL in Iraq. Yeah. But you're not buying Prime Minister Cameron's reasoning, are you? Why not?
No, I think that there's been a lot of talk about going into Iraq and Syria, and really there's been a fear factor that's been whipped up, especially in recent weeks. Yesterday we saw the arrest of Anjem Chowdhury and a number of his, sort of inner circle. And today we've seen that those people have now been released. With those arrests, what we see is that the media obviously latch onto it, and they start to push this narrative that we are in imminent danger. This is, I feel, fed into the vote that we saw in the Commons today.
But then again, Amandla, your organisations, so organisations like yours, are in the minority. The British general public tend to agree that there is a need to stop ISIL and other extremist groups.
I think the British public, maybe understand that ISIL, maybe is a threat, to the region. But I think most people don't really see ISIL as being a threat to the UK. We've heard from Jay Johnson, who is the Homeland Security Chief, that ISIL presents no present danger to actual American homeland. We've seen other very high-profile security experts also say the same thing about the UK as well. I think the real question is how do we deal with this, and whether we should actually be dealing with it, or whether it's something that is a regional problem.
What about these foreign fighters who are leaving the UK, apparently in droves, to join the fight in Syria, in Iraq, to join groups like ISIL? Aren't you concerned that what would happen when they return home? They may be radicalized and they may pose a threat to national security.
I think it's very important, to look at the evidence before us. Since 9/11, there have been about 66 Britons who have been involved in terrorist plots in the UK. Of those, only 2 or 3 were actually involved in fighting abroad or training abroad. So we had the majority of those people actually committed those atrocities because of Western foreign policy at the time, in Afghanistan and Iraq. The war in Syria, which most British fighters were drawn towards, wasn't a war against British foreign policy or American foreign policy, and so there wasn't really a threat. It's only now that Western countries have decided to declare war on groups in Iraq and Syria that we're seeing threats coming from ISIL, direct threats coming from ISIL, telling its followers to really target places in the UK and in Britain as well.
Amandla, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insight with us. Amandla Thomas Johnson there, spokesman for CAGE. Well, there's been a rally outside the Central Mosque in Paris against ISIL. Hundreds of people demonstrated against the